So as you know, our topic today is social media measurement. And as Laurie mentioned, I'm the community manager at TechSoup Canada. Just so you know a little bit more about me, this is me here at someone else's computer. I have a background in software engineering. I blog a lot about nonprofit technology, so you can read my blog and blogs from other coworkers at TechSoup Canada on our site. And I am not a social media expert. I just like to emphasize this because I don't think there is anyone out there who's a social media expert. It's changing so fast. What I'm hoping to do with you today is share some of the stuff that I've learned as a community manager about using social media and measuring it. And I'm also looking forward to hearing what you have to say and contribute as well. I think we're all learning together. So before we dive into the material, I always like to go through this little exercise of talking about the 5 stages of measurement acceptance, because I think it's important for us to think about where we're, like how are we approaching this topic, and how are our organizations that we're in approaching this topic. So this is a framework that Beth Kanter created, and she's a fantastic blogger on the topic of social media measurement and other topics that I recommend you read if you're interested in this topic. And she says there's 5 stages, so denial, fear, confusion, delight, and data informed. So just briefly to walk you through what those means. So denial is being in a state where you say, I don't think there's a point in measuring, I don't even think you can measure. You know, the social media is all about relationships. There's nothing of value that you could measure there. We're not going to do it at all. Fear is the stage where you say, well, we could measure, but I'm kind of scared to learn what we might find out if we measure, so we're just not going to do it. And confusion, I suspect that a lot of you are in the confusion stage. That's definitely where I find myself some of the time. And that's a stage where you say, well, I think I want to be measuring, but I'm not really sure how to get started. I'm not really sure how to go about it or what's the right way to do it. But there's more stages than that. The next one is delight. So that's the stage where you have started measuring and you were so excited about it, and you basically measure everything that you can, and you create graphs and charts, and they're so pretty and you're so happy. But really all you're doing is creating graphs and charts. And I like to mention this one because once you get past confusion, it can be easy to get caught up in the delight stage and not realize that there's still one stage left to go, which is being data informed. And this is all of our goal of being here today, is that we can all be data informed organizations. So what this looks like is that you are aware of what the data is, you are measuring your use of social media, and you're using it to inform your decisions. But you'll note that and Beth Kanter's actually moved away from using the language data-driven, which I really like that move, because data-driven to me kind of implies that you're controlled by your data in a way, that if it tells you one thing, then you have to do it. But you don't, right? You use the data to inform your decisions, as well as an understanding of your mission, and well as just a general understanding of what you're doing. So all of our goal today is to get to that data-informed stage. So I just want to get a little feel. I'm going to put everyone's hands down here, and then we could do another little raising hand thing. So raise your hand if you feel like you're in the denial stage. Does anyone feel like they're at that stage, or maybe someone in their organization is? No, so how about, okay, we got 1 or 2. How about at that fear stage? Is anyone sensing that they or their organizations is really worried about what might happen if they start measuring? Okay, we've got a couple of hands here. How about the confusion stage? Who here is feeling like they just don't really know how to get started? They don't really know how to proceed with this? Okay, we've got lots of hands going up, so you guys are definitely not alone. Don't worry. Anyone feel like they're at the delight stage? Creating charts and graphs out the wazoo. Yep, okay, again, a few hands going up. I definitely find myself there quite often. And is anyone feeling data informed? That at least in part they're at that stage, or their organization's at that stage? Okay, again, we've got 1 or 2. Great. So with that in mind, let's dive into learning about how we can move up this little ladder here. So I want to start off by talking about why we measure social media at all. So to me, really the number one reason is because, like anything else we do in a nonprofit, it has to be contributing to our mission at the end of the day, right? And I think when social media started becoming a big thing, there was a lot of hype around it, and there was a lot of, oh, you're a nonprofit, you need to be on Facebook, you need to be on Twitter. A lot of jumping on the bandwagon without necessarily reflection on why we were there, why we were spending our time on this as opposed to other things, etc. Because, I mean, if you're like me, I mean, you're community managers as well, it does take time, right? I think I definitely find that to do it well. So is it contributing to your organization's mission? Are those efforts paying off, or could you really be doing something different that would be more effective to get to the same goals? I think in keeping with this as well, measuring your social media practice helps you to improve it, right? So if you're just going along and you're not measuring, you don't necessarily have a sense of whether what you're doing is working or not. But if you are measuring, then you can experiment with different things, you can find out what works or not, and that will help you to actually improve. So you can be moving forward, you can be doing an even better job, and again, contributing back to your mission, rather than just sort of going along day by day and not really taking that time to reflect about it. The other reason to measure social media is that for many of us, we need to prove to somebody else in our organization or outside our organization that what we're doing is worth our time. So for you, that might be your leadership, or it might be funders and people giving you grants. And you need to say to them, you know what, I know you think the social media thing's a little bit weird, maybe you don't get it, but this is why we're doing it. These are the results that it's having, and this is how it's contributing to our organization. So for a little context, thank you everyone for taking the time to answer the questions when you registered. And so I noticed that there was a lot of range of people here. Some of you are coming from a background where you've been using social media, but the idea of measurement is really completely new to you. So for those of you, I really want you to see this webinar as an opportunity to reflect and think about what you're doing with your social media, and start setting some goals for yourself, start setting some metrics for yourself, and really think about this as a way to take some baby steps in the right direction of getting started with measurement. So I don't expect that tomorrow you're going to be a social media measurement superstar, and that's okay. Don't expect that from yourself. Just take this as a way to learn about what you can do, and then set a small goal for yourself of maybe starting to measure one aspect of what you're doing, and then build on it from there. And then, so that's some of you, and then a bunch of you in the audience are feeling like you do some social media measurement already. Maybe you have some metrics that you mentioned. Maybe you already even know some of the tools I'm going to mention at the end of the session. And in your case, I would see this as an opportunity to really reflect on what you're doing in a structured way. I find for myself as a community manager, even though I have a practice of measuring what I do, sometimes it can be really valuable to take that time aside and think about what I'm doing and reflect on whether I'm going in the right direction. So if you're in that scenario, I invite you to think about it that way. The other thing I want to say up front about measuring social media is that I mean, there's a lot of potential discussion and debate around this, and some of you may have questions and be thinking about this. But the question that I've got before when doing this talk is, isn't measurement kind of limited as a way of telling us how we're doing with social media? You know, like metrics only show one side of the equation. What about those things that are more difficult to measure? And I want to say right up front that those things are important as well. I don't think metrics is going to completely capture your practice of social media and whether it's working or not. I think it's one really important dimension and one really important tool in your toolkit. I think that you also need to look at those relationships and the stories and the connections that you make on social media and those things that are more difficult to measure in combination with the metrics. I think that on their own, either one of them is a little bit limited, but when you combine those metrics and the stories together, you get a really full picture of how your social media is going. So today we're going to be focusing on the metrics and measurement side of things, but that's not to say that that other part, that stories and the relationships, isn't important as well. So please don't think that what I'm saying is discounting that. So let's jump right in with a little bit story. So I was really glad to see in your answers that a lot of you have been using social media for at least a year and some of you for many years. And the reason I think that's important is because social media measurement is not necessarily something that you can start off right from the get-go. You need to figure out the tools first. You need to figure out what they're doing and what the point is. So this is taken from a friend of mine, Jason Chim, who works for an organization called Mosaic in Kitchener-Waterloo that runs the Pathways to Education program, which is a program for youth to help them graduate from high school. And they started using social media as a way to communicate with the youth because they realized that all the high school students are on Facebook already, and that was a much faster way to communicate with them than to try to like phone them at home or send them an email or something like that. They just didn't check those methods of communication. So they started doing, after a long phase of getting buy-in from their leadership, they started doing this, of communicating with their youth through Facebook. And the initial response from all the client workers, the youth workers, was incredibly positive. When Jason asked them, he said, "Is this successful?" And they said, "Yeah, it's saving us a bajillion hours," right? Which is a great indication that it's very successful, but it's not exactly something you can take to your management and say, "Oh yeah, we're saving a bajillion hours. We should all be doing this more frequently." I don't know if their leadership would really buy into that. So instead, they thought about, okay, what is a metric that is important to us that will capture the success of what we're doing? And eventually they came up with this. They said, before we use social media, if we had to call youth to tell them about a change in our programs, we would phone them up. Sometimes we would get an answering machine and have to leave a message. Sometimes we'd get a sibling or parent and we'd have to tell them to go get the youth. Maybe they weren't there. They'd have to write down the message, etc. On average, each one of those phone calls took them 5 minutes. So when you add up 5 minutes for every youth, and for every time there's a program change, so this is happening pretty frequently, it added up to 3,600 hours every year. So that probably doesn't mean a lot to you, but what that is that's the equivalent of 2 full-time staff per year. So they went to their leadership and they said, using Facebook is saving our staff saving people 2 full-time staff positions per year worth of time. So that's a very powerful metric. It's a little bit of an unconventional one, and it's very personal to their organization. But it's just to show you the power that quantifying this kind of thing can do. So if they had just stopped at the bajillion hours, yes, it's successful, but they're not able to communicate that as well. But by taking that extra time to think about what are their metrics, what is important to them as an organization, they were able to quantify their success in a really powerful way. So let's talk a little bit about how you can get to that stage. And we're going to start by doing a little basic measuring. So normally when we're in a bigger group, I would actually ask you to shout this out, but I'll just get you to think about it for a second. So how many times did you post on Facebook last week? Or how many Twitter followers do you have? So these are pretty common metrics. Maybe a few of you want to throw your answers into a chat window so we can see what they are. Does anyone know that just off the top of their head without having to look it up? Who knows the answer to that? Okay, yep. Bunch of people. Awesome, they're flowing in. Okay, so we've got it ranging, numbers ranging all over the place. Great, thank you so much for sharing. So the point is, a lot of you can actually tell me right off the top of your head the answers to these questions. So let's do a couple of more questions. So does anyone know off the top of their head how many emails they sent in the last week, or how many phone numbers are in their address book? Anyone? Anyone know or want to throw that into chat? Yep, no idea. Great. Nope, haha, okay. So the reason I ask this is not because these metrics on the left aren't valuable, and I'll talk in a second about the context that they can play, but I just like to emphasize the fact that metrics on their own are a little bit meaningless if they're not put in the context of goals. So before we jump into talking about metrics, this is why we're going to take a minute to talk about what are your goals for social media, because otherwise you end up with this scenario. You get a bunch of random numbers that don't really mean anything. So, goals for social media. So the idea of this is, again, linking back to your mission, you need to know what your goals are you trying to achieve on social media. And for those of you, even if you don't have metrics set out that you measure regularly, you may already have come up with certain goals for your social media practice, or maybe not. Maybe you just kind of use social media and you have this in the back of your head, but you haven't actually taken the time to write it out on paper. So we're going to take a couple of seconds to do that now, and I wanted to get you to think of, I wanted to help you out by showing you some examples of goals. So you'll notice that on this list, what's not on this list is something like having a presence on Facebook, or something really generic like raising awareness, right? Raising awareness, not that you can make that more specific and make it valuable, but on its own, it's a little bit vague and it's difficult to measure. So what you'll notice about these goals in the examples, like promoting an event, getting feedback from supporters, these are all really tied into your mission, and they're all things that you can actually figure out how to measure and how to know, did you promote your event or not? Was that successful? Did people show up? Getting feedback from your supporters. Did people give you feedback? Did they not give you feedback? Sharing information on a topic. Are people reading your information? Are they absorbing it? So there's a bit of a sense of, are these goals actually can you actually accomplish these goals? And these are all very concrete, tangible goals. So some of you may have goals already, and so for those of you that don't have goals, what I want you today is to just get that basics of, let's just write down on paper what are some of my goals, get it out there, get it out of your head and articulate it. For some of you, you have really well-established goals, so what would be more helpful for today is to focus on a sub-goal. So the example I want to give you here is from the Girl Guides of Canada, and they have a great Twitter and Facebook practice, and one of the metrics, one of their goals is to build community among the girls and women in their programs, both between each other and also between those girls and the women and the organization. That's one of their goals. And so thinking specifically about Facebook, they were doing that for a while and they were having a lot of success, really building up a community. They were mostly using the metrics of reach and the number of comments as a way of measuring whether they were successful or not. And using those metrics, they saw that, yeah, they were successful. Their reach was increasing. They were getting tons of comments on everything they posted. It was going really well. And then they realized, they took some time to reflect on it, and they said, wait a second. All of these people that are posting and commenting and stuff like that, these are all women, right? We're missing out on those girls that are involved in our programs. We're missing out on that segment of our audience. So they said, okay, let's focus on a sub-goal of getting more girls involved. And they measure this using the Facebook Insights. Now you'll notice, if you know anything about Girl Guides, you'll know that this is not actually their Facebook Insights, because there are not nearly that many guys that like their Facebook page. This is just an illustration as an example. However, you get the idea. They were using the Facebook Insights to see how many people liked them, and then able to see who was actually responding to their posts. So they did a whole bunch of initiatives targeted to girls, for example, posting guest blogs by younger girls and just encouraging them to sign up in various different forms of outreach. And they were able to see through their insights that their demographic had changed. So they were able to see that that was a successful initiative. So as I said, for some of you, what you might be trying to think about today is a goal, just articulating what your goals are for social media. And for some of you that have really well-articulated goals, think about a sub-goal that you can focus on for the next 4 to 6 months. So there's a lot of different approaches to metrics, and as I told you before in the example, you can really be quite creative. So what Jason came up with, Pathways for Education, is a very unusual metric, right? The amount of time saved from contacting clients with phone calls versus Facebook. On the other hand, you can use other metrics like Facebook Insights, for example. So what I'm going to go over today, it doesn't cover stuff like that, but I just want to say that those are totally valid metrics and can be really actually more powerful as well. But in terms of thinking about some of the more conventional metrics, I really like this one framework that was created by a group called Fenton that works with nonprofits around social media. And they basically came up with these 4 types of metrics to think about. And I think this is helpful because it helps us take all the common metrics that we hear about really frequently and that some of these social media tools report on and think about them in a more structured way and think about how they relate to our goals. So in short, Fenton says that there are 4 main types of metrics. So these are see metrics, say metrics, feel metrics, and do metrics. And generally these fall under the categories of exposure, engagement, and conversion. And as you can kind of get a feel for from the way that the diagram is on this slide, conversion metrics are really the ones that you're going for at the end of the day. These are the concrete actions that are contributing to your mission. Everything else is leading towards a conversion. So the other metrics are helpful, but they're helpful in the sense that they build engagement, that they get more people seeing your message, which leads to conversions, right? I mean, of course, not everybody is going to convert all the time, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're, if someone's just engaging with you and not donating, say that they're not valuable to you. By no means, I don't believe that at all. But I think what it does help you to do is to look at your metrics in context, and I think it's also helpful to push ourselves and think, well, what are the do metrics? What are we actually asking people to do at the end of the day? So if you're a little confused, don't worry. I'm going to show you some examples of what all these metrics could look like to give you a feel for what we're talking about. So just going to walk through each one of these here and so we can give you some examples. So let's start with see metrics. So see metrics are really about who is looking at your stuff on social media, who is exposed to your message. And as I showed you back here, I really think that see metrics, this is my little amendment to their framework, fall into 2 categories, followers and views. So there's followers that are going to be potentially exposed to your message. And then there's also views, which is people that concretely, definitely look at what you have to say. So some examples of follower metrics are things like the number of people who like your Facebook page, the number of Twitter followers you have, the number of people who are subscribed to your RSS feed, stuff like that if you do RSS subscriptions. Also, you'll notice here that most of my examples have to do with Twitter and Facebook, just because those are the most commonly used platforms. But of course, the same concept expands to Google+, to Pinterest, to any other social media, to your own online community, whatever it is. It's really the similar idea. So, right, so all of these things, Twitter followers, page likes, etc. So I think these metrics are valuable, which is why it's worth mentioning. And the reason that they're valuable is because if you have 0 followers, you can guess how effective your social media is going to be, right? Obviously not very effective. Or if you have 1 follower and it's your mom. Or if you have, but think about it this way, what if you have 20 million followers and none of them are interested in your cause, right? Like that's also not very useful, potentially, if none of them pay attention to you. Or if you have 1,000 people on Facebook, but they've all blocked your messages from showing up in their news feeds because they don't like what your organization does. So you have to take these numbers with a grain of salt. And I think what's also important is that you're not focused on them, right? Like remember that see is a way to get say and feel metrics, which are a way to get do metrics, right? The see metrics are not the goal in and of themselves. So I think that's the really important thing to remember with these follower metrics. Yes, it's good to have followers because that means that people are interested in what you have to say, and that means that people are hearing your message, which is a good thing, but don't get hung up on them. The other type of see metrics, which are a bit more valuable in my opinion, are the view metrics. And these I think are more valuable because they indicate that someone actually saw your message, which is like it gives you a much higher degree of certainty that people are reading your stuff. So as an example, the number of people who view a video on YouTube, or the Facebook reach number. So do people know what I mean when I say Facebook reach? Just throw a note in the comments if that is really confusing to you. No, okay. I'm just going to give you 2 seconds, a little demonstration of what I mean. So this is Facebook. So if we see here, right here, I was pointing out with my finger, that's not very helpful. I posted something on Facebook, a question about someone to post on our Facebook wall. They were looking for recommendation of CRMs. Feel free to share if you have any ideas. And then at the bottom, we see this number of 298 people saw this post. So that's the reach. That means that, okay, as you can see, I have 486 people that like my page, but not all of them actually see every post in their newsfeed. Only actually 298 people actually saw this post go through their newsfeed. So the reach gives me a sense for how good or interesting the post was, because the more interesting it is, the more people interact with it, the more Facebook will say, well, this is a really good post, and it will show it to more people, and that reach will increase. So you see some of my posts, see this post, for example, only 205 people saw that. The reach was much lower. So whatever I did with this was a little less exciting than whatever I did with this question, or this one got more interaction in any case. So that's what I mean by reach. It means how many people saw this going through their newsfeed on Facebook. Another example of a view metric is clicks on a link. So there's a lot of link shortening tools such as Bitly or owl.ly. And if you haven't heard of those, don't worry, I'm going to come back later and give you a little demonstration of what that's about. But for those of you who know what it is, you know it's basically tracking how many people click on a link. So that is another indication of views, how many people saw your stuff. So that's all the C metrics. It's like how many people are looking at your material. All you have to do is look at it. The next 2 sets, say and feel, are all about engagement. So these are people that are interacting with you and what you have to say. Now the difference is that say metrics are basically when people repeat your message. Feel metrics are when people are going that extra step further and they're repeating what you have to say, but they're also putting their own comment on it, or their own spin. So they're it's more personal because they actually took the time to write a message. So what a say metric would look like is, say on Facebook, if you post a piece of content and somebody likes it, right? So like we just saw with the Friday feed message that I posted on Friday, I wrote a little roundup blog, and you see I've got 2 people that like it. So that's my say metric. 2 people liked what I had to say. Another example from a Facebook perspective is if somebody shares my, so using this share feature, if someone shares it but doesn't write their own message, they just do a straight up share. That would be, they're basically just repeating what I have to say to their followers. So it's a really good endorsement. It means that they think what I have to say is really interesting. They want to repeat it, but they're not adding something personal of their own onto it. Example in the Twitter world would be a retweet, right? So again, this is someone just directly repeating what you have to say. They press that retweet button. It's quick and easy. I think it sounds like we have a question, so I'm just going to find out what that is. And then we'll get back to more metrics.
So, Tierney, people had a few questions about views on Facebook, fan page, and so forth. One comment was that people can like your fan page, but choose only to receive certain updates, and this affects the reach a lot. Any comments about that, or how they can improve that?
So as I said, Facebook's, and there's more in-depth blog posts you can read on this, but basically the way Facebook's algorithm works is that they look at how much engagement there is with a post, and they use that to send it to more people. So it's a little bit complicated because for every single individual who likes your fan page, Facebook is using an algorithm in the background to figure out what to put on that person's news feed. And so it's going to look at a whole bunch of different things. And it's not just your fan page it's looking at all the fan pages that that person likes. It's looking at all their friends. And for every one of those, it's looking at, okay, has this person interacted with that friend or with that fan page recently? It's looking at, for this given post that this friend or this fan page posted, have a lot of people interacted with it already? Do people think it's interesting? So it's a lot of complex stuff it's doing in the background. For your purposes, what you need to know is that having people like your stuff, comment on your stuff, share it, that's going to show Facebook that people are engaging with it, and that's going to increase the reach. As well, the sooner people do that after you post, the more likely it is to do well. So if you put something up and somebody, like 10 people like it right away, it's going to get a lot higher reach than if you put something up and the likes slowly trickle in or there aren't any at all. And a comment and shares are more engaging than a like, etc. So Facebook has this complicated algorithm for all these things. The other thing, I'm not sure, I was talking about this with a couple of people last week. I'm not an expert on this topic. My understanding is that you might not ever get the reach that's actually equivalent to the number of page likes. And that may be somewhat intentional on Facebook's part because they want you to actually pay for that post to be promoted, which is a thing that you can do, and it drastically increases your reach. So I'm not an expert on that because I've never actually tried that myself, and I don't quite know how that works. But if you're interested in really boosting up your reach a lot, that's one thing that you might want to consider is paying a small amount to Facebook for them doing that. The other thing that I'll say really briefly about that topic is that you'll notice if I hover over reach, it shows me organic and viral. So basically, organic are the people that actually like my page, and they're seeing this in the newsfeed. Viral is basically the people who like me, their friends are seeing this. And that's because this post is so engaging that Facebook's sharing it with other people. Like, you know, if you see in your newsfeed, oh, so-and-so's, like, your friend liked this other comment. Sometimes you see that. So that's kind of what reach is all about. Any other questions we should answer right now, Lori?
Yeah, I think you sort of answered the second question was as to why some people can't see your posts even though they're part of your Facebook page, and I guess it has to do with that complicated algorithm.
Yeah, so it has to do with how many people interacted with your post, and also, as I said, how much that person interacts with you in your page. The more they interact with you in their page, the more likely they are to see your content in the future. Great, so I'm going to go back to our metrics, and feel free to let me know if you have any more questions. So just as I was saying, a couple of other examples of say metrics would be retweets, or on the email world, if people just forward your email straight on to someone else. Whether or not you consider email social media is questionable, but it's an example. Or on Google, if people give you a +1. Now we have feel metrics, which, as I said, show that slightly deeper engagement. So this is, say, if they share your stuff on Facebook but put a personalized message, or they retweet your tweet but put a personalized message. Or even better, in my opinion, if they actually take the time to comment on your Facebook or blog. I think that's really one of the greatest signs of engagement is when people take the time to actually post a comment. Those can be really valuable. The other thing I've thrown in here is online mentions. So if someone actually just takes it on their own initiative to mention you online, maybe whether it's on Facebook or Twitter or anything like that, or even writes a blog post about you, that's a very powerful feel metric. So they're really taking their own initiative to talk about you and write their own words of how they feel about your organization or your cause. So all of these, as I said, they all are pointing towards these do metrics. And the big question is, what is your do metric, and what role does this play for you? So are you trying to use Facebook for fundraising, in which case the do metric is to get more donations? Are you trying to use Facebook for advocacy, in which case it's those advocacy actions you're looking for? Are you trying to use Facebook to promote events, in which case it's your attendance you're looking for? So the do metric is going to be directly linked to whatever your goal is. And then, as I said, all of these other metrics feed into your do metric. And again, going back to what I said at the beginning, take all of this with a grain of salt, right? Remember that all of this is in accompaniment to the stories and the relationships and that whole other piece. But in terms of an actual measurement practice, this is what you want to do to make sure that the metrics you use are directly tied into your goals. So we're just going to take another couple minutes now, very briefly, because I know we're getting towards the end here, and do a similar thing like we did with the goals, but sharing some metrics. So what I encourage you to do, even if you already have metrics, just stretch yourself for a minute and try this out. If it's valuable, great. If it's not, that's okay. As I said, there's lots of other ways to approach metrics. But try to think of one metric from every category, or from most categories. Maybe you don't want one for both say and feel, etc. But you got the idea. And think of what those are. If you want, just write them down for yourself. And if you feel comfortable, share them in the chat window, and we'll throw them into that doc again so we can get a feel for what other people have to say. I did a bunch of research on tools, and you will find in that handout that I showed you at the beginning of the session that Lori showed you that you can download from our website. On the second page of that handout, you'll find a lot of great resources that have long lists of social media tools. So I'm not going to go in depth today on all those tools, but just want you to know that that resource is there for you. If what you're looking for at the moment is new ideas for tools, it's all there. Overall, there's a few things that I wanted to say. Number one, there are social media tools out there that are really fancy and beautiful and expensive and will do all sorts of things for you. They will shower you in metrics. You'll be drowning in all the metrics that they give you. And they're wonderful and they're pretty and happy. And you will just kind of drool over them as a social media manager. And if you are in a place where your organization can afford that, great. They're really wonderful and really powerful. Go for that. A lot of you can't. So that's, it can be kind of tempting to say, well, if I don't have one of these big fancy tools, then I can't really do any measurement at all. And I want to tell you that that is not true. The thing with these tools is that because they show you so much stuff, they can also be really overwhelming. And the feedback that I've heard from people that use these kind of tools is that even they say, you know what, you need to know what you want to track. And if you don't know what you want to track, you're not going to get anything out of this tool, right? So it's like we talked about at the beginning, the difference between being in that delight stage where you're overwhelmed with metrics, but you're just happy for your own sake because you have so many metrics, or you're data informed where you know exactly what you want, you can use the tool to find out how to get it, and then you can use that to make better decisions and to improve what you're doing. So if you do have one of these tools, don't fall in the trap of just being overwhelmed by all the metrics and being at that delight phase. You need to be really focused and decide what you want, which is why we talked about picking metrics first. However, if you don't have one of these tools, don't think that that there's nothing that you can do in terms of measurement, because there are a lot of free and low-cost tools out there. And also, reminder that there's lots of ways to find out certain metrics that aren't that a tool is not going to tell you. I mean, sometimes actually just counting stuff manually or asking people, like, how did you find out about this event? Did you find out about it through social media? Sometimes those can be a really powerful way of getting metrics too, and there's not a tool that's going to tell you that. And again, with the free and low-cost tools, I really suggest that you only use them if they measure the metrics that you want. I mean, again, there's so many tools out there that you could basically spend your whole week just measuring different metrics and not actually taking any information from them, not really using them to be data informed. So only use try them out. If they work for you and they help you towards your goals, great. And if they don't, just ditch it. Don't waste your time on it. The third point is at the end of the day, it all comes back to your spreadsheet. So with all of these tools, really what ends up happening for most experienced community managers that I know is that they end up collecting all the data from all these different tools in a spreadsheet, bringing it all together, adding their own reflections, and then that's the main thing that they use. And I've heard this from, I do this myself, and I've heard this from people, some of these people that have these fancy, expensive tools, they say at the end of the day, still the most important tool in my toolkit is my spreadsheet. So no matter how nice a tool you have, your spreadsheet is your best friend, and so it's great. So all of you can know that this is in your power, right? Everyone can afford a spreadsheet. The most important thing is your brain. That's your most important tool, and reflecting on those metrics that you have and using it to make better decisions. So here's an example of a spreadsheet. This is a template that Beth Cantor has, and you can actually download it here, and I have all these links on the handout as well, if this is a helpful template for you. The most important thing about our template that I want to point out, though, you'll notice it has a bunch of metrics, yada yada, and it has this column at the end of what did we learn. So going back to the reflection and data informed piece, always ask yourself, don't just track stuff, but ask yourself, what did I learn from this? Did I learn that posting at this time works better or doesn't work well? That people like this topic or they don't like it? really take that time to reflect, and that's where you're going to really get the real value with the metrics. It's not how many metrics, it's just having a few key ones and then taking this time to ask yourself, what did we learn? However, I don't want to totally leave you high and dry, so I want to really quickly show you a couple of the tools that I'm using at the moment. This isn't to say that these are the best tools out there, they're just the current ones that I'm using. And as I said, if you have tools that you really like, I'd totally invite you to put that in the chat window and let us know what the name of the tool is and what you like about it or what you're using it to track, and then we'll throw that into the spreadsheet or that Google Doc as well and share that with everyone. So just to show you a few of these, this is what I'm using for Twitter. So Bitly, which I said is a link tracking tool, 20 Feet, and Google Analytics. So I'll quickly show you a couple of these because I know we're running out of time. Bitly is one I really want to show you. So basically what it does is it takes a long, big link you have, like say this link for my social media measurement. I take that, I put it into Bitly, so right here, and then what it does is it spits me out a shortened link. So you can see it says bit.ly/ a bunch of gobbledygook. And what I can do is I can copy and paste this into Twitter, say, or anywhere really that I want, and then A, I've got a shortened link, which is really nice, especially on Twitter, and then B, it will actually track how many people click on that individual link. So we can see here some of the links that I've shared, and some of them nobody clicked on at all, and some of them a bunch of people clicked on. And then I can see overall what are my stats, how many people have clicked on different links on different days. So you can see some days the stuff that I shared was really popular and successful, and on some days I really wasn't doing a good job of sharing stuff or people weren't interested in it. So that's a tool I find really helpful, and it gives you a bit of demographics. Very briefly, I find 20 Feet is really helpful. This is also a free tool. Both of these are free for being able to see just some really basic stats about Twitter. So like the mentions, your retweets, your tweets. So instead of having actually go to your Twitter account and count, you can just get a feel for that right here. And then because it's graphed out for me, I can immediately see, oh look, something really good was happening on June 26th. I've got this huge peak. Well, what was going on? Okay, that day I was actually at a conference on social media, which is why I was tweeting a lot, and a lot of people were retweeting and mentioning me. And then what was I doing on these days that was good or bad? I can reflect on that and make a note of it in my spreadsheet. And Google Analytics is also a powerful tool. It's way too powerful for me to show you right now, so I won't get into it. But being able to track referrals from social media to your website is really, really helpful, and I do that a lot. And in terms of Facebook, I mostly do use Facebook Insights because they are really good. And one thing that I would point you towards, if you haven't found this out already, I just discovered this fairly recently, is that you can actually export your data to Excel. So I find that, again, with the spreadsheet, I like to add my own notes onto it, like what did I learn? And so I just export the data, and then I add my own notes. And again, looking at what are the peaks and valleys of your data, what was going on those days, what were you doing that was working or not. So just a quick example to bring things all together. You've got your goals, so something like, say I want to promote my event, Toronto Net Tuesday, on Twitter. Then I set metrics to match that goal. So maybe some of my metrics are the number of people that clicked on my Bitly link, so to show the number of views and the interest, the number of people that retweeted it, and then the number of people that registered via social media. And then I think, how am I going to track that? So I'm going to use Bitly to track the clicks. I'm going to count the retweets because I need to see which tweet they retweeted, if it was the event-related one. And then I'll ask people when they register, did you find out about this through social media? So that's just a very simple example of how you can bring this all together and get a sense of whether your social media is working or not through measurement. So I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions quickly, and I encourage people to keep sharing stuff. If you have any more thoughts on goals, metrics, tools, throw it in the question box, and we'll be sharing that Google Doc with everybody afterwards, so you can take some more time at your leisure to read what your peers had to say. So, Lori, are there any questions that we want to answer at this point?
Sorry, yeah, just one so far. It's on the question of things going viral. Someone asked, is 1% virality on Facebook, is that a good percentage? And if not, what would be a good percentage to shoot for?
That is an excellent question. You know, I'm not really sure off the top of my head. I will tell you 1% is not huge. I can show you what my virality is here. We'll just take a look. I don't think we're particularly good at going viral here at TechSoup Canada yet. Although you're welcome to like us and then share our posts, and then maybe we'll go more viral. But you can see with our stuff, as I said, it sort of tends to range in the 1 to 3%. So I'm basing that on the idea that that's not super high. So maybe I can find some blog out there that will help give a better idea of what some good benchmarks are. I don't know about virality, but I will say in terms of benchmarks, N10 does regularly publish a nonprofit social media benchmarks report. So if you're wondering, oh, are my numbers similar to other organizations of my size and sector, I highly recommend downloading their report. I can maybe get a link to that after this. And you can take a look at that and you can see if your numbers are typical or not. So we're going to stay around for another couple of minutes if anyone has questions, but I know some of you have to leave because it's just about 3 o'clock now. So I wanted to say, for those of you that need to head off, thank you so much for taking the time to come to this webinar. Look forward to hearing your comments. We do have a survey to get your feedback, so I'd really appreciate if you took the time to answer that. We'll send you a link in the follow-up email. All this recording and resources will be available after, as you know. And yes, have a lovely day. Thank you so much for joining us. And okay, just for the rest of you that are still here, we do have a few more questions that you've asked, so we'll see if we can do anything about answering some of those. So Lori, what are people wondering?
So we have more questions about specific tools. So Tierney, what are your thoughts on using dashboards to pre-schedule your social communications? So using Hootsuite or TweetDeck, or I don't know if you've used Pinterest. How do you feel about using these dashboards and scheduling them? Is it useful?
So there's definitely some different opinions on this question. A friend of mine wrote a good blog on this recently. So my personal opinion, I do actually use TweetDeck, and I do schedule posts using TweetDeck. Hootsuite is another great tool. In my opinion, it really comes down to a balance between your time and managing your time well, and also being engaging. So from a time perspective, I do find it really efficient to schedule tweets because I'm just able to do it all at once. I can get into my head, I can arrange them, like distribute them across several days or different hours or something like that, so I'm not having 20 different tweets all at the same time, because I just went on Twitter for 5 minutes and sent out 20 tweets, and that can be really overwhelming for your followers. So I find it helpful in that sense, that it does help you distribute your tweets throughout the day and do it in a way that's manageable for your time. I think the main thing that you have to be aware of if you're scheduling tweets is that Twitter is not a schedule and walk away kind of tool. It's like your email, right? Like if you scheduled a whole bunch of emails to go out, you still have to go check your email to see if anyone replied to you, right? So same thing with Twitter. If you do schedule tweets, A, you need to really make your tweets sound like they are in the moment. Don't make them sound like they're pre-scheduled. B, you need to be checking back regularly, so to see if people replied to you, if people retweeted you or whatnot, so you can engage with them. And C, you don't want to be scheduling all your tweets. So I would still encourage you to go on from time to time, see maybe there's someone else's tweets you want to retweet. Maybe you want to send a message to someone or reply to someone. Right? At the end of the day, Twitter is a social tool, and so if all you're doing is scheduling stuff and you're just using it as a broadcast medium, then you're not really getting the value out of Twitter. So I think in the right context, it can be a good time-saving measure, but I think you really have to be aware of how you're coming across, what impression you're giving, are you being social, are you actually engaging people? And if you can balance those two things successfully, great. If you're just using it to broadcast tweets, then that is not great. What other questions do we have, Laurie?
So someone was asking specifically about the tool called Clout, which is an app on Facebook that measures your influence on the social web. Tierney, I don't know if you've used that tool, but maybe you have some thoughts on any of these kind of tools that measure your social presence.
There's another great question, a bit of a minefield as well. So Clout, as the questioner was saying, okay, never mind, I was going to look into it, but it looks like it's asking me for too much detail. As the person asking the question was saying, Clout is a way to measure, basically what they've done is they've made up this secret algorithm that spits out some kind of score, I think it's on a scale of 1 to 100, to say how good you are on Twitter, basically. Like, are you a leader, are you an influencer on Twitter? And the higher your score is, the more reputable and respectable and influential you are on Twitter. And so everybody has a score that's out of 1 to 100, and you can go on Clout and you can look up what your own score is. I mean, I think there's a lot of different opinions on this, and I encourage you to read up about it. My personal opinion is that I think it's interesting, and if you can use it to inform you, like if you do find it a helpful metric, then great. But I also wouldn't get hung up on it. So I would go check in and see kind of what range you're in. Like, are you in the 10s? Are you in the 50s? Are you in the 90s? You know, it can be interesting to see what this particular algorithm thinks of you, and get a feel for that. And it will give you some other stuff, like it will say what areas it thinks you're influential in, and etc. Personally, I was tracking it for a while because I thought, oh, this is a really interesting metric, and then I eventually stopped tracking it because to me it wasn't connected enough to those do metrics. Like, it was just too disconnected from my goals that I didn't really find it useful. It was more, I was realizing for myself, I was looking at it as more of a vanity metric, right? Like, yay, my Clout score is going up, or no, it's going down, but I didn't have a clear sense of, because I have no idea what's making it go up or down, it was really hard for me to change it, whereas Facebook, you know, the reach or something like that, I feel like I have more influence. Like, if I see that the reach is low, I can really reflect on, well, what did I maybe not do as well with this? Was it a bad post? Was it just the timing was off? And I can actually improve for next time. So because of that, I didn't find the Clout score to be particularly useful to me. However, as I said, it's still kind of an interesting measurement to look at. I just wouldn't, I wouldn't get too hung up on it, and that's my opinion. Do you have any more questions?
So that seems like all the questions there are. We can send you some further links, in particular to that N10 benchmark report. It's a great resource. We can post that on the webinar page, which we showed you earlier. And we do encourage you to download that worksheet. It's a great place to start if you're just starting out with social media measurement, to go through this process of figuring out your goals and your metrics. So thanks everyone for really sharing a lot with your thoughts and links and your questions. That was really helpful. And thank you, Tierney, for a great webinar. That was fantastic.